Nzub was 12, though her eyes bore the quiet ache of someone twice her age. Her small frame moved swiftly across the courtyard under the blistering afternoon sun, balancing a clay bowl of water atop her head while her feet dodged sharp stones. The village of Amwahia slumbered in heat, but her chores waited for no shade. She had scrubbed the washing stones by the stream before dawn, gathered cassava roots from the bush, and now was cleaning the kitchen that would never feed her enough. Her skin, dark and sun-kissed, was streaked with dust and sweat. But she didn't complain. Complaints earned slaps in this house. Worse, they earned silence, that icy refusal of acknowledgement from her aunt, Mbik, a woman whose heart had grown twisted with loss and greed. Nzub was an orphan. Her parents had died in a flood 3 years ago. Since then she had been dumped in her aunt's care like a bag of rotting yam. Aunt Mbik, heavy with rings and opinions, claimed she took Nzub out of pity. But pity, Nzub soon learned, did not buy bread. Her aunt's own children had left for the city long ago, and she spent her days hosting gossip under the guava tree or polishing the broken-down radio she claimed still worked. Only Nzub labored, cooking, scrubbing, fetching. But she did so with the mechanical grace of someone who understood that survival is often silent. Behind their compound, separated by a crumbling clay fence and tangled roots, stood an ancient mango tree. It was older than the oldest elder in the village. No one planted it. It had simply been there, as if it had risen from the earth before memory. The villagers called it the Mute One because it never dropped fruit when watched, and because no birds ever nested in it. Its bark shimmered faintly, especially under moonlight, and its roots pulsed outward like the veins of a sleeping beast. Most avoided it. A tree that bore fruit in harmattan, in drought, in flood, was not to be trusted. Nzub, however, was drawn to it. At first, she simply swept near its roots, humming the songs her mother used to sing while peeling yam. But in recent weeks, the hunger had grown unbearable. Her aunt rationed food with the cruelty of a miser: 2 spoonfuls of rice, a lick of soup, maybe a piece of dry fish if the day had been good. That day had not been good. She had spilled water while carrying it from the stream and received no dinner. Her stomach growled in rebellion, echoing louder than the cicadas. She stood near the mango tree long after sunset, barefoot and breathless. Moonlight filtered through its dense leaves like liquid silver. Then she saw it, one single mango hanging lower than the rest, heavy, glowing faintly as if lit from within. It didn't shine like fire. It shimmered like a slow breath. Nzub's eyes widened. It was unlike any mango she had ever seen. Its skin was gold-tinged, the color of sunrise soaked in honey, with tiny star-like speckles that flickered in patterns. She hesitated. The warnings were there. Her aunt's voice in her head, the village elder's whispers, the stories of fruit not meant for human mouths. But hunger was louder. She reached up, hands trembling. The mango detached easily, falling into her palms with a weight that surprised her. It was warm. Almost alive. Nzub looked around. No one. Just the hush of the sleeping compound, the soft buzz of insects, the distant hoot of an owl. She held the mango closer. A strange scent rose from it, not sweet, not sour, but something ancient. Like rain on stone. Like a memory not her own. She slipped behind the broken fence and crouched beside the tree. The soil beneath her felt soft, like velvet underfoot. With her back pressed to the bark, she brought the mango to her lips and took a bite. It was not mango. Or rather, it was more than mango. Her teeth met no resistance, just softness that melted instantly, flooding her tongue with warmth and light. Not flavor, feeling. She felt, all at once, her mother's arms around her. The way her father's laughter once filled their old hut. She felt cool river water on her legs, the scent of roasted plantain, the soft hum of evening fires. Tears sprang to her eyes before she even understood why. The second bite carried thunder. The third, silence. The final piece. She didn't realize she was crying until the last drop of golden juice slid down her chin. Her chest rose and fell with something more than breath. Her stomach no longer ached. She felt full, not just of food but of something grander, vaster, as if the universe had poured a little of itself into her. Then the air changed. Nzub sat still. Something had shifted. The breeze no longer rustled the leaves. The crickets paused mid-chirp. Even the shadows seemed to bend toward her. She looked up slowly. At the edge of the compound, past the kitchen where her aunt often smoked her pipe, someone stood in the darkness. Watching. A figure cloaked in shadow, tall and unmoving. She couldn't see a face, but she felt their gaze as surely as a hand on her shoulder. The mango tree's bark beneath her seemed to hum, as if acknowledging the presence. The figure took a step forward, then stopped. The moon slipped behind a cloud, and in the blink of darkness, the figure was gone. Nzub stood up, heart pounding but oddly unafraid. Her bare feet pressed against roots that now pulsed with a rhythm she couldn't name. She didn't understand what had happened. Only that something inside her had awakened. And someone, or something, had seen it. She brushed mango juice off her chin, straightened her torn wrapper and whispered to the tree. "Thank you." The leaves above her rustled once in reply, though there was no wind. Nzub returned to her mat that night, her stomach no longer gnawing and her spirit strangely quiet. The moonlight returned slowly, bathing the tree in silver again. But the branch where the mango once hung remained bare, and would never bear fruit again. The next morning broke in dull gray. Rain had threatened all night but never arrived, leaving the village damp with silence. Nzub woke early as always, sweeping the courtyard with her worn broom. Her body moved out of habit, but her mind was somewhere else. Even her stomach, which used to growl like a caged animal at dawn, remained strangely quiet. She felt different, grounded yet light, as if her feet touched the earth but her heart hovered somewhere above. But peace has short legs in Aunt Beak's house. By mid-morning the quiet began to crack. A group of children playing near the compound wall had begun whispering among themselves, their laughter coated in curiosity and suspicion. One of them had seen Zub the previous night, crouched behind the mango tree, glowing fruit in hand. Another claimed the fruit sparkled like the moon. Children are not subtle creatures, and their whispers eventually found ears eager for outrage. Aunt Beak was in the kitchen, pounding ogbono with the vigor of a woman battling more than soup, when the first child's voice called out, "Auntie, your girl eats the spirit's mangoes now. She glows in the dark." Beak turned slowly, pestle frozen midair. "What did you say?" The child, emboldened by attention, repeated it louder. "She picked one from the big tree. Last night. It glowed." Something inside Aunt Beak shifted from curiosity to fury, like a pot turning from simmer to boil. She stormed out of the kitchen, her wrapper flapping like angry wings, and found Zub sweeping calmly by the doorway. Without a word, she grabbed her by the arm. "Is it true?" she hissed, shaking her heart. "Did you touch that tree? That cursed, silent tree?" Zub flinched, shocked more by the suddenness than the grip. I was hungry, Auntie. Just one mango." Before she could finish, a slap cracked across her cheek. It was hard and mean, not the kind that ends a conversation but the kind that begins punishment. "Which spirit thief?" Aunt Beak's voice rose, drawing the attention of neighbors. Zub stumbled back, her cheek blazing red. "It was just fruit. It was hanging low." Another slap. Then a shove. "You think you're better than the rest of us? That the gods owe you sweet fruit while the rest of us drink Gary and lick bone?" "I didn't know," Nzub whispered. "I didn't mean any harm." "Of course you didn't know. Stupid children don't know when they bring curses into a house. You want to steal from spirits." Her voice trembled with a fury born not just of anger but of fear. "You'll eat dust instead." With terrifying calm, Aunt Beak dragged Nzub across the yard and shoved her into the storeroom, a square clay chamber used for drying cassava and keeping old tools. It had no windows, only one crooked wooden door and a floor made of packed earth. She slammed the door shut and bolted it with a rusted latch. "You'll stay here until the spirits forgive your stupidity," she said. "Let them feed you now." Nzub didn't cry. She sat with her back to the wall, stunned more by the shock than the dark. Her cheek throbbed, her knees were scraped, and her heart pounded, not with fear but with confusion. Had she really done something wrong? The tree had not cursed her. The fruit had not harmed her. And yet, now she was locked in a box like a criminal. Time passed slowly in the dark. Morning bled into afternoon, then into a gray, suffocating evening. The storeroom grew hotter by the hour, the air thick and unmoving. Hunger returned, first a dull ache, then a clawing howl in her belly. Her throat dried, lips cracked. She tried to sleep, but each time she closed her eyes, images came unbidden. The dreams were not like normal dreams. She saw herself floating above a sea of green, through a jungle that pulsed with life, trees with leaves like mirrors, rivers that ran with silver, animals that watched her without blinking. There were no paths, only roots that moved, rearranging beneath her feet. In the center of this forest stood a woman, tall, cloaked in starlight. Her face was half hidden, but her eyes shone like dawn over still water. Nzub approached slowly in the dream, though her legs did not move. It was as though the space between them bent. The woman knelt and touched Nzub's cheek, right where the slap had landed. The pain vanished. Her voice, when she spoke, was not sound but vibration. It moved through the air like music, like the hum of bees and drums at once. "You are not broken," the woman said. "The fruit was not meant for the earth, but it chose you." Nzub opened her mouth to speak, but the words did not come. Instead, she felt warmth spread through her ribs and down her arms. The pendant of light she'd seen on the mango's skin reappeared in her hands. Only this time, it pulsed like a heartbeat. The dream shifted. Now she stood under a sky made of swirling clouds that bled into stars. Trees bowed as she passed. Birds sang her name. But just as she was about to ask what it all meant, the sound of a bolt scraping broke the vision. The door creaked open. Ant and Beak stood there, glaring. "Still alive? Good. You'll clean the goat pens before dusk." Nzub blinked, eyes struggling against the sudden light. Her lips parted, but she said nothing. She stood and stepped out, barefoot and silent. But inside her, something had taken root, something larger than shame, stronger than fear. The punishment had ended, but the transformation had just begun. Ask ChatGPT. The storeroom's darkness pressed close, and time slipped into something softer than minutes or hours. Without food or water, Nzub drifted in and out of fevered sleep. Yet each time her eyelids fluttered shut, the blackness peeled away and another world unfolded, so vivid she could taste its air. She floated first above a river alive with fireflies. They pulsed gold and violet, swirling in patterns that formed shapes, hands opening, a seed sprouting, a woman's face half smiling. The river itself shone like clear glass. Beneath its surface she saw constellations instead of stones, as if the sky had traded places with the water. A gentle current carried her forward until banks of luminous reeds bowed in greeting. Somewhere distant, drums thumped a heartbeat she recognized as her own. She blinked. The scene morphed into a forest where every leaf glowed light green from within, turning the air emerald. Trunks spiraled upward, their bark patterned like woven cloth, and roots moved under the earth as if searching. She stepped across a carpet of moss that hummed beneath her feet. Children emerged, 5 of them or maybe 6, hard to tell because their outlines shimmered. They were her height yet older, their eyes reflecting galaxies. Their skin bore tiny constellations that twinkled with every breath. "Who are you?" she whispered, but her voice sounded like wind chimes. They giggled, a sound that smelled strangely of ripe guava. One child with silver pupils answered, "We're the caretakers you forgot you knew." Another added, "You've tasted the sky's seed. Now the roots remember you." As they spoke, vines twined up Nzub's legs, warm and comforting, not trapping. She felt a pulse climb through her bones to her chest, meeting the echo of the mango's glow still lingering there. Each vision ended with the woman cloaked in starlight. Sometimes she stood atop a mountain framed by auroras. Other times she knelt at a cradle woven from moonbeams. Her words never changed, "Find balance, little keeper. The fruit must give as it has taken." On the 4th morning, real light finally sliced through the storeroom crack. A rusty bolt scraped, the door swung wide, and Ant and Beak's silhouette blocked the sun. "Out," she barked. "You've cooled your head enough." Nzub rose slowly. Her limbs ached and thirst rubbed her throat raw, yet her spine felt newly straight. She stepped into the courtyard, blinking at the brightness. The household servants froze mid-task. Their eyes widened, then drifted to her face. Nzub touched her cheeks, expecting grime and tear streaks. Instead, her fingertips met skin faintly warm, almost fever-glowing. She caught a glimpse in the metal water basin. Her irises glimmered with tiny flecks of gold, like dust caught in late sunlight. Ant and Beak's scowl faltered. "What witchcraft is this?" she hissed but gave no time for answer. "Fetch water. Scrub pots." Nzub obeyed, yet every step felt buoyant as though unseen roots pushed her upward. Villagers passing the fence stopped to stare. Whispers floated, "Her eyes, star-touched. Is she cursed?" But the greatest stir wasn't Nzub herself, it was the mango tree. Overnight, new blossoms had erupted. Where branches had sagged dull a week ago, now dozens of fruits swelled, larger, brighter, each one glowing faintly as dusk lanterns. Bees circled but did not land, held at bay by invisible heat. Even the air near the trunk shimmered like mirage. Old Mama Ifioma, who limped past with her walking stick, gasped loud enough to summon neighbors. "I've lived 80 harvests and never seen it fruit twice in a season." Men gathered, hats in hand. Women clutched rosaries. Everyone kept their distance, eyes darting between the radiant tree and the orphan girl with shining pupils. Nzub lowered her head and continued scrubbing her aunt's cooking pots. Yet inside her chest, the visions remained, layered like songs. Rivers of fireflies, children of constellations, roots that remembered. She understood nothing fully, but she sensed purpose coiling like new vine within her. The fruit had not cursed her. It had awakened her. When evening came, the sunset spilled amber across the sky, and the mangoes glowed brighter as though answering. Nzub paused at the water jar, lifting her gaze. For a heartbeat she thought she saw figures under the canopy, child shapes shimmering among the leaves. They raised their hands in silent greeting before fading into dusk. She smiled, tiny but certain, and carried the water inside. Behind her, whispers spread beyond the courtyard, down the lane, into the heart of a suddenly uneasy village. The tree had bloomed again. And whatever lay beyond its roots was reaching, remembering, beckoning the girl who had dared one forbidden bite. Nzub slipped back into the pattern of chores because Aunt and Beak demanded it and because habit can feel safer than questions. Yet nothing behaved quite as it used to. The rope at the community well, once coarse and stubborn, glided through her hands like oiled silk. Buckets long known for tipping and spilling now settled squarely on the clay lip, their water calm as glass. When she knelt to rinse vegetables in the basin behind the kitchen, the flow formed playful spirals that rose to meet her fingers before falling again. She said nothing, but wonder flickered behind her luminous eyes. Stranger still were the animals. A goat with a swollen leg limped behind her from the cassava patch, bleeding softly until she paused and laid a cautious palm on its flank. Heat pulsed from her skin into the bruise. The goat shuddered, then trotted away almost steady. 2 days later, a kite with a broken wing fluttered into the courtyard. Nzub cradled it to her chest, humming the tune she'd heard in her dreams. By dusk the bird beat both wings and vanished into the amber sky. Aunt and Beak called these coincidences, yet her voice quivered each time she said the word. On the third afternoon, Nzub was sent to fetch water alone. The sun blazed down but felt gentle on her back as though filtered by unseen leaves. She reached the well at the edge of the village where thick acacia trees cast puddles of shade. Usually a boisterous place full of gossip and laughter, it was empty save for the steady creak of the rope and the rustle of dry grass. As she tied her bucket, a breath of cool air swept across the clearing, carrying a scent like distant storms and old hearth smoke, wind and ash braided together. A man emerged from behind the largest acacia, cloaked head to foot in charcoal fabric that flickered at the edges like smoke. He was tall and lean, his face hidden beneath a hood. Yet Nzub felt no fear, only the same quiet recognition that had stirred when she first touched the glowing fruit. She kept her hands on the rope but raised her chin. "Good afternoon, sir," she said softly. His voice, when it came, sounded like rustling leaves mixed with distant thunder. "You draw water easily now," he noted, nodding at the bucket already brimming. "The well knows who you are." Nzub swallowed. "I'm just a girl." "No, child," he said, stepping closer until the air around him seemed to ripple with heat. "You are not cursed. You've been chosen." She tightened her grip on the rope. "Chosen for what?" "To keep balance," he replied. "The tree behind your aunt's house is not of this world. It is a gate, planted in shadow long before your village had a name. Few can taste its fruit and live. Fewer still are invited." Nzub's pulse hammered, yet she felt anchored as if roots held her to the ground. "Why me?" "Because you were hungry," he said simply. "And because you shared before you ever thought to hoard." He lifted one gloved hand. In his palm rested a small seed no larger than a cowrie shell, silver and gleaming with an inner light. It hummed, emitting a faint vibration that traveled through the air into Nzub's bones. "What is it?" she whispered. "A reminder," he said. "A promise. Plant it when the sky tells you. It will open doors to answers you cannot yet carry." She reached out, and the moment her fingers brushed the seed, warmth spread up her arm, settling behind her ribs. She wanted to ask who he was, how he knew what sky he meant, but words tangled on her tongue. The stranger took a single step backward. Dust swirled around his feet. The acacia leaves shivered though no wind blew. "Wait," she called. "Listen to the roots," he said, voice already distant. "And trust the light inside the seed as you trusted the light inside the fruit." With that, he dissolved. There was no other word for it. His cloak turned to ash and scattered, leaving only a faint spiral of charcoal dust that rose and disappeared against the harsh blue sky. Nzub stood alone, the silver seed pulsing like a second heartbeat in her palm. She slipped it into the hidden pocket of her wrapper and hoisted the full bucket as if it weighed nothing. The path back to the compound felt shorter, lined with grasses that bowed gently as she passed. Over the fence she glimpsed the ancient mango tree, its branches heavy with new glowing fruit. The villagers who had gathered murmured in awe and fear, but Nzub saw something else. faint silhouettes of childlike figures weaving among the leaves, their constellation skins sparkling in daylight before fading. Inside the hut, Aunt Mbik scolded Nzub for returning late, yet paused mid-tirade, eyes drawn to an unmistakable glow radiating from the girl's pocket. Nzub said nothing. She dipped a cup into the water jar and set it before her aunt, the liquid shimmering with motes of reflected light. Aunt Mbik hesitated, then drank. For a moment the harsh lines of her face softened. That night Nzub lay on her mat, seed clasped in her fingers, listening to the distant rustle of the mango tree and the softer rustle of secrets sprouting in her heart. She did not know when the sky would speak or what doors would open, but for the first time since her parents' death she felt not just alive but awake. And somewhere beyond the veil of sleep, children with constellation eyes waited, humming her name like a lullaby. At first Aunt Mbik didn't notice. She had locked Nzub in that storeroom expecting to open the door to a broken girl, or none at all. But instead she found a child who seemed brighter. Not in her usual beaten-down way, but shining in a quiet, unspoken way. Nzub's eyes no longer looked hollow. Her skin, once dulled by work and hunger, now glowed with a healthy bronze. Even the servants whispered, "The girl walks like something touched by sky." Mbik watched from the corner of her eyes, lips pursed. At night, she pressed her ear to Nzub's door, but heard only silence or the soft rustle of a girl sleeping peacefully. She began muttering prayers against witchcraft and sprinkled salt in Nzub's bathwater. But her suspicions turned to hunger the morning she saw the mango tree again. It had bloomed fully, dozens, maybe hundreds of glowing mangoes heavy on its ancient limbs. No other tree in the village bore fruit that season. Even the yam leaves were curling from drought. Yet here it was, defying all things natural. And this time Aunt Mbik didn't just see a miracle. She saw profit. That afternoon she picked one. The mango buzzed faintly in her hand, like something alive, but she ignored the tingling. Back in her kitchen, she sliced it, offered a piece to her sister friend from the next compound. The woman chewed, then gasped. "My headache, it's gone," she said. Mbik's eyes gleamed. By the next day she'd filled a basket and gone to the market. "Come and see. The tree of healing. One bite and your pains disappear," she shouted, holding up the glowing fruit like a priestess brandishing a relic. Buyers came cautiously at first. Old men with aching knees, young mothers with sick babies. They tasted, they smiled, they wept with relief. And they came back with friends. Within a week, people journeyed from neighboring villages just to buy a slice. She began charging more. Then more again. One woman tried to take a mango without paying, and Mbik slapped her so hard the market froze. "This fruit is sacred," she shouted. "And sacred things must cost something." All the while, Nzub watched in growing horror. She tried to stop her aunt the first time, tugging at her wrapper as she prepared the fruit. "Auntie, it's not meant to be taken." "Foolish girl," Mbik snapped. "Was I supposed to let miracles rot on the branch? You think spirit trees are planted for dust to gather? But the tree, it gave. It didn't ask." Her aunt turned slowly, eyes sharp as broken glass. "Everything that gives must be made to give more. That is how the world works." Nzub said nothing more. She couldn't explain the dreams. The silver seed humming beneath her pillow. The visions of balance and warning. The whispered riddles about too much taken, not enough given. Every night she felt the tree tremble a little deeper in the soil, as if trying to shrink itself. The air around it no longer shimmered, it twitched. By the end of the second week, the bark had darkened. The leaves turned stiff. Yet the fruit kept growing. Aunt Mbik hired boys to climb higher and pluck them faster. Nzub stood alone one evening after sunset, staring up at the tree. She placed her palm gently on the trunk. It felt dry, hollowed. Her heart panged with something like guilt. "Please," she whispered. "We're not all greedy." And then she heard it. Not with her ears, but her bones. A long, deep cry, muffled and slow, rose from beneath the roots. It was not a sound made by animals or humans, it was the aching groan of something old, something sacred, something alive, breaking open inside. The cry echoed in the hollow of her chest and shot up her spine. The bark split in 3 places, thin cracks glowing faint orange like veins of lava beneath skin. Nzub stumbled backward, clutching her pendant. The silver seed in her room pulsed once, then again. Aunt Mbik, asleep on her mat, did not stir. But Nzub could swear she saw the shadows near her aunt's feet coil inward, as if listening to the tree's pain and making plans. Outside, under the dark stars, the ancient tree dropped 1 glowing mango, then 2, then a dozen more. But the light had changed. It was no longer warm or inviting. It was white-hot. angry. And the earth, for the first time in generations, began to hum. That night, Nzub couldn't sleep. The air was too loud, though no one else seemed to notice. It pulsed in waves through the leaves, through the clay walls, through her chest, low, constant, insistent. She lay on her mat with the silver seed pressed against her heart, the pendant's thread wrapped around her fingers. Her aunt snored restlessly, muttering in her sleep, and outside, the wind whispered like something searching for a door. Then the tree screamed. It wasn't like the last time, this was louder, deeper. A sound not made for human ears. It started as a groan from the earth itself, then cracked upward like a bone splitting in two. The mango tree glowed briefly from the inside out, its trunk lit up like it held lightning, then it split down the middle with a thunderous sound that made the ground jump. Nzub sat bolt upright. Her fingers burned. The seed had gone from warm to searing, white-hot and pulsing, no longer humming but singing in tones that weren't from any known world. Outside, the sky cracked open. It began not with rain but with wind, violent, rushing wind that flew backward, dragging leaves from the ground into the sky instead of the other way around. The village dogs howled. Chickens scattered. Roofs flapped like panicked wings. But there was no thunder. No lightning. Just silence and blue light pooling above the tree. Nzub stepped outside, barefoot, hair flapping wildly. The mango tree now stood wide open, its core hollowed and glowing like a furnace of stars. Around it, embers floated like fireflies but never fell. Then came the lightning, thin, jagged streaks of blue cracking downward but landing soft, like silk threads anchoring something above. From the heart of the tree they emerged. Tall, fluid beings made not of flesh but of shimmering dust and light. They flickered as they moved, their outlines forming and dissolving like shadows on water. Their eyes held galaxies. Their feet barely touched the ground. They moved with no sound, yet each step sent gentle ripples through the dirt. The village woke. Doors banged open. People screamed. Some fled without shoes, some fell to their knees in prayer. Children wept. One man fainted. Aunt and Beak came stumbling out in a wrapper half-tied, stared at the glowing figures and collapsed face-first into the dirt. But Nzub did not run. She stepped closer. The wind that had battered everything paused at her approach, parting like a curtain. The embers floated slower. The mango tree, now fully hollow, pulsed in rhythm with her seed. She felt her feet root to the ground like trunks. Felt the glow inside her stretch out into the dark. The beings turned. And bowed. Every single one of them, their bodies rippling like stardust in water, bent at the waist before her. One stepped forward, taller than the others, with threads of silver and violet curling through its form. Its voice was 1,000 bells in a quiet room, soft, yet so deep it shook her ribs. You returned balance. Nzub said nothing. Her mouth had forgotten how to form words. The thief broke the pact. The being continued, its luminous eyes resting on Aunt and Beak's crumpled form. She took without gift. Took without silence. Took and forgot the tree listens. Another of the beings came forward, placing what looked like a single dewdrop into Nzub's hand. It dissolved instantly, flooding her with memories she had never lived. A forest before time, trees that walked, seeds that spoke, a girl who once was chosen and failed. A promise broken. A tree buried. The tall being raised its head. Now we return. Not to punish. But to ask. Nzub looked up at the open sky. The clouds no longer moved as if time had paused. The stars twinkled below the clouds now, not above. She knew without knowing how that a gate had opened. Not just in the tree but in her. You must decide, the being said. Let the gate close forever. Or keep it open. But know this, whatever you choose you will carry the burden. What burden? She asked. Her voice trembled. The being stepped closer, almost touching her forehead. To be a bridge between soil and sky. Between hunger and healing. Between greed and grace. Nzub turned to look at her aunt, still unconscious. Around the village, people watched her from behind huts, from under carts, from rooftops. She remembered being starved. Locked away. Called a thief. But she also remembered the first time she touched that glowing mango and how it had not filled her stomach, but her spirit. How it had whispered gently not to take more. She looked down at the silver seed, now pulsing soft in her hand. Then she looked at the beings. I choose balance, she said. The tallest one bowed again. Then the seed must grow. Nzub knelt. The earth beneath her cracked open just enough. She placed the glowing seed into the soil beside the withering tree. The moment her hands touched dirt, the sky pulsed with golden light. The beings lifted their arms and the tree, split and dying, began to hum once more. From its center, new roots shot downward. From its branches, new leaves unfurled, silver-veined, glowing faintly. Nzub rose. The beings faded into mist, one by one, their stardust trailing up into the reopened sky. The clouds folded back into place. The wind stopped. The embers blinked out like fireflies saying goodbye. And in the silence that followed, a new tree grew. Not from this world. But now, belonging to it. Nzub barely felt her body move as the last shimmer of stardust faded from the beings. The seed was buried, the earth sealed again, but something in her still pulsed like a second heart. Before her, the new tree stood tall, its bark silver-threaded, its leaves glowing gently as if breathing. Then the world folded inward. She didn't fall. She didn't rise. She simply shifted, like stepping between breaths. One blink and the village vanished. She was standing in a place where the sky bent like silk above her head, its constellations close enough to pluck. Stars hung like ripe fruit, gently spinning on invisible vines. The air was rich with the scent of rain, charcoal, mango sap, and something more, something like memory. Beneath her feet, rivers of glowing water wound through the landscape, humming softly in tones that vibrated against her bones. Every ripple sang a wordless song. The trees here weren't just trees, they were sentient, watching. They moved in slow rhythms, their leaves flickering with stories. Nzub knew somehow that this was not heaven, not a dream. It was the other world, the sacred in-between place, older than time and younger than fear. This was where the mango tree had grown its roots. This was the soul behind the soil. And there, under a canopy of starlit branches, stood a figure made of light and shadow. It was her mother. But not as she remembered. This woman glowed with grace, her skin a mirror of the stars, her eyes filled with ancient sadness and joy. She wore no cloth, no crown, only light wrapped around her shoulders like a shawl of dawn. Nzub's breath caught in her chest. "Mama?" The woman smiled, her voice like a lullaby hummed against a drum. "I have watched you, my fruit. You fed the ground when it was cursed. You sang even in silence. You honored the tree." Nzub ran into her arms. There was warmth there, not heat, not flesh, but warmth in the truest sense. A mother's embrace, eternal and deep. The rivers around them surged gently as if sighing with joy. "I don't understand," Nzub whispered. "Why me?" Her mother touched the center of her chest. "Because we are keepers of the gate trees. My mother before me. And hers before her. It passes through pain, not blood. Through sacrifice, not status." Nzub blinked. The stars above shifted and she saw visions. A girl in ancient robes planting the first tree in the middle of a desert. Another girl giving her only fruit to a weeping stranger. A mother hiding her glowing child from raiders. Each one had been a guardian of fruit that fed more than the body. It fed the souls of people, of lands, even of worlds. "The fruit is life," her mother continued. "Not just for one village. Not even for just one planet. When it is consumed in kindness, it heals. When stolen, it starves the roots of everything." Nzub listened, mouth slightly open. "You are the bridge, child," her mother said. "The tree bloomed again because you gave when all you had was hunger." Then the light around her mother shifted. It bent slightly and from it stepped other beings, not like the stardust spirits from before. These were girls, boys, people of every kind. Each one glowed with their own light, soft and distinct. They were guardians, each marked by a small silver seed hovering at their side. They stood in a circle, smiling warmly. A new voice echoed through the space, not from one of them but from the river itself. "You may stay," it said. "Join the orchard of stars. Protect what lies between." Nzub turned slowly. She could feel the offer in her bones. To live among these light beings. To never hunger again. To become part of something eternal and vast. But then she thought of her village. Of the little boy who gave her a lizard once because it was all he had. Of the old woman who cried from toothache and still cooked for her anyway. Of the tree she had buried a seed into. The earth that still ached from what had been taken. And of the children who might one day eat the fruit again and not understand what it cost. She turned back to her mother, her voice steady. "I want to go home." Her mother didn't look disappointed. She nodded. "Then you return as more than a girl. You return as a keeper of roots." Nzub stepped forward and the other guardians raised their palms. A soft wind lifted her into the starlit sky. The pendant on her chest pulsed once. The silver seed within her began to glow again. As she floated upward, her mother's voice followed like a breeze. "Remember, daughter. The fruit listens. And the world will always need someone who remembers the taste of light." With a sound like wind folding cloth, Nzub was gone. and on the red earth below a silver tree shimmered, waiting. Nzub reappeared with the first breath of dawn. She stepped onto the red soil of the village barefoot, the air still carrying a hush from the storm the night before. Her dress shimmered faintly with otherworld dust, her eyes holding more years than her 12. Birds did not sing. The wind barely moved. It was as if the earth itself held its breath to welcome her back. Where the mango tree once stood, there was now only a vast, cracked circle of roots, silvery white and curled into the ground like sleeping serpents. The trunk, the leaves, the glow, all gone. Only a faint heat lingered in the soil, as though the tree had returned to its world and left behind a whisper of its magic. Nzub knelt and touched the earth. It chose to leave, she murmured. Behind her, quiet gasps echoed. The villagers had begun to emerge from their homes, barefoot and tentative, like people waking from a dream too real to dismiss. Faces that had once scowled at her now stared in reverent awe. They remembered the sky that split, the beings of light, the girl who had not run. "She's back," someone whispered. "She went beyond," said another. "She's not just a girl now." But Nzub paid no attention to the murmurs. Her eyes scanned the crowd until she found what she already knew would be there, Aunt Nbeek, hunched in the shadow of her hut, wrapped in a faded wrapper, her skin an unhealthy gray, her lips cracked. The mangoes she had hoarded lay rotting at her feet, their golden skin now blackened and oozing, filled with squirming worms. The basket that once overflowed with wealth was now a nest of decay. Her aunt reached out a trembling hand. "Nzub, child?" The woman who once dragged her by the ear now could barely lift her head. Nzub walked slowly toward her. Her footsteps made no sound. The children followed, keeping a respectful distance behind her like a procession. She stopped before her aunt, who now knelt, coughing dryly. "It was the fruit," Nbeek whispered hoarsely. "It cursed me. I only wanted to sell enough to fix the roof, to have something. You know how hard life is for a woman alone." Nzub tilted her head slightly. "You were never alone." Nbeek blinked, tears brimming in her dull eyes. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know it would take me too." Nzub knelt before her. Her voice was low, gentle, and strangely calm. "The tree does not punish, Aunt. It balances." A hush fell deeper over the village. Even the wind stopped. "You took too much," Nzub continued, "and gave nothing back. The tree is not from this world. It is older than greed, deeper than hunger. It came to teach us, not feed us." The elders bowed their heads. Mothers clutched their children closer. A few of the youngest wept without understanding why. Nzub stood again and walked toward the village square. She placed a hand on the head of a crying toddler with swollen limbs. The child calmed instantly, eyes clearing, breath evening. Then she turned to an old woman with aching joints and a clouded gaze. With a soft touch on the shoulder, the woman straightened, standing tall for the first time in years. But for the strong men, the greedy traders, the ones who sold mango pieces like gold and laughed at hungry mouths, Nzub passed them without a glance. No healing. No touch. Only silence. One of them fell to his knees. "Please, girl child, forgive me. I didn't know." Nzub looked at him. "You knew. But you didn't care." Then she turned to everyone. Her voice was not loud, but it carried like a bell through still water. The tree did not come for hunger. It came for harmony. And harmony cannot be hoarded. The wind picked up slightly, swirling through the roots in the earth. Finally she returned to her aunt, still kneeling. Nbeek clutched her hands together. "Nzub, please, forgive me." Nzub crouched, their faces inches apart. Her gaze was not angry. It was ancient. "I forgive you," she said. Her aunt sobbed, shoulders shaking. "But the tree," Nzub whispered, "may not." And she walked away. Behind her, the roots glowed faintly one last time, then faded completely, sinking into the earth as if they had never been. Only the memory remained. Ask ChatGPT. The dry season ended early that year, as if the clouds themselves had heard the rumors of change. Rains came soft and frequent, turning the village pathways into ribbons of red mud, but no one complained. They said the sky had grown generous since the night it opened, and they pointed to Nzub whenever they said it, half in reverence, half in wonder. Soon after the last storm, Nzub chose a quiet patch of earth behind the community school, land once trampled by goats and littered with broken slates. She knelt there at dawn, pressed her palm to the soil, and buried the silver seed the stranger had given her. She did not carve a boundary or mark the spot with sticks. She simply whispered, "Grow as you wish and we will listen." Within a week, a single shoot pierced the ground, glowing faintly green even in daylight. Children on their way to lessons stopped, wide-eyed, to watch it sway though no wind blew. By the second week, the shoot had become a sapling with translucent bark and leaves shaped like teardrops of light. By the full moon, branches had multiplied, curling into the air and bending back toward the earth until they formed arches. Then came the fruit, round, oblong, star-shaped, spiral. No two alike. Some shimmered coral pink, others deep indigo speckled with gold. Their skins glowed softly after sunset, painting the schoolyard in pale rainbows. Elders trekked from neighboring villages to see the grove that grew faster than gossip. They arrived with walking sticks and questions, but mostly they sat in quiet awe beneath the living arches while children traced constellations in the luminous canopy. The fruits released a fragrance like morning rain on charcoal mixed with ripe mango and something new, something no one had words for. The scent lingered in pupils' clothes, in teachers' hair, and in the empty evening streets, so that even far from the grove, people could close their eyes and feel nearer to wonder. Nzub spent her days there, guiding without ruling. She taught the children how to sit with their backs to the glowing trunks and breathe until they could hear the grove's pulse, a low, thrumming rhythm like distant drums. She showed them which fallen petals made soothing tea, which leaves could be placed on a wound to weave the skin together faster, which coiled vines sang when plucked like harp strings. She never harvested fruit for trade. If one dropped at a child's feet, that child ate it slowly, seeds and all, then planted the seed in the sandy verge beyond. Those seeds sprouted smaller shrubs bearing luminous berries, food for the goats and birds. People began calling her Nwanyi Nairi Yuwa, the one who fed the sky, but she preferred simply Nzub. My name already means hope, she joked to the schoolmaster, and hope should never sound distant. Still, the new title stuck in whispers and songs, traveling faster than ox carts. Strange birds arrived with the first sunrise after the grove's branches touched in a full circle. They were pale turquoise and long-tailed, unknown to the hunters or the oldest field books. They perched high in the glowing canopy, dropping seeds shaped like tiny crystals that melted into the earth. Some mornings, their chorus blended with the children's multiplication tables or the clack of chalk, creating melodies that made visiting inspectors forget their stiff posture and tap their feet. One afternoon, while the pupils recited proverbs, lightning flickered on the horizon though the sky above remained clear. A hush fell over the class. Nzub closed her eyes listening. When she spoke, her voice was calm. That storm will not come here. The grove is singing back. Minutes later, the clouds on the horizon nodded and drifted apart like sheep led home. Elders who witnessed it whispered, the air is different around her, lighter, wiser, awake. Sometimes Aunt and Beak shuffled to the grove's edge, wrapped in a faded shawl, eyes hollow yet yearning. She never crossed the invisible line where glowing roots met dust, but she listened to Nzub's lessons from a distance. Once, seeing her aunt tremble, Nzub picked a single petal and placed it in a gourd of water. She handed it to a small boy who carried it to Mbik without a word. After drinking, her aunt's cough eased and she managed a shy nod. Forgiveness, Nzub believed, was a fruit too. The grove changed the school's rhythm. Lessons moved outdoors, timed to shade patterns cast by branches. Arithmetic under orange fruit at dawn, history when violet berries brightened at midday, storytelling as the canopies glowed deepened at dusk. Parents who once worried about chores allowed their children extra minutes, believing the grove taught things beyond books. How to sense harmony, how to breathe with the wind, how to recognize the quiet nudge that says, enough, when hunger turns to greed. Months rolled into seasons. The first glow of the grove never dimmed. Travelers sought it, not to buy or pluck, but to sit in its hush and remember something they hadn't known they'd forgotten. They left small gifts, woven bracelets, poems scratched on banana leaves, water from distant springs. Nzub accepted all, planting some, returning others to rivers. Balance, she explained, is a circle, not a scale. On the anniversary of the seed's planting, the children surprised her with a song they'd written. Verses about a girl who tasted a star fruit and taught the earth to sing. They sang under the largest arch, their voices weaving through branches while the strange turquoise birds added high, spiraling notes. Nzub closed her eyes, hands pressed to the roots, feeling the pulse ripple outward into the land, toward fields, toward rivers, toward hearts. And she realized that the grove was no longer hers alone. It belonged to anyone willing to give as much as they took, to listen as deeply as they spoke. Hope, she thought, should always feel like this. Roots in rich soil, branches open to the sky, and every breath a promise that harmony can grow faster than fear. Nzub was 22 the morning the first helicopter blade thumped above the grove. She paused mid-lesson, chalk poised in one hand, and waited for the rush of air to fade. The pupils around her, 12 bright faces ranging from age 6 to 16, some from her village, some from 3 countries away, looked up, wide-eyed. They had grown used to visitors arriving by dusty road or rattling bus, but the sky seldom delivered guests so noisily. Nzub simply smiled, tapped the word symbiosis she had written on the board carved from a fallen trunk and carried on. The visitors, ecologists from a coastal university, disembarked in the clearing beyond the school. Their shoes sank into soft moss that glowed faintly where light touched it. One scientist whispered, "Photosynthetic luminescence?" Another bent to sample soil. Within minutes they would seek Nzub's permission to run tests on sap droplets, fallen fruit, even the air. She would grant them small vials, never entire branches, and remind them to sit in silence afterward so the grove could teach what microscopes would miss. Researchers came often now. So did spiritual pilgrims, poets chasing metaphors, investors hoping to patent the grove's miracles, and skeptics determined to expose her as a gifted hypnotist. The grove greeted all the same, with fragrance, with easing breath, with a hush that loosened clenched jaws and quieted busy thoughts. Some left with new papers to publish, some with new prayers to recite. Others left empty-handed and red-eyed, having realized no instrument bottles harmony. Nzub stayed humble. She still slept in the same clay hut near the school, sweeping its floor at dawn, sharing porridge with children who had never known another mother. She still washed her own clothes in the singing river and mended sandals beside elders who shared gossip and goat stories. Fame passed over her like migrating starlings, bright, noisy, gone. She remained a tree rooted in the soil that raised her. On the 9th anniversary of the night the sky opened, she rose before sunrise and walked alone into the grove's heart. The arching branches formed a cathedral of swaying light. Each trunk bore fruits of every shape, none quite alike. Crescent melons, spiral pears, cubes that felt round once bitten. She carried a stack of freshly cured bark sheets, stitched with vine thread, and a quill hewn from a turquoise bird's fallen feather. She chose a smooth root near the center and sat cross-legged. She wrote first about hunger. How its ache can fold a child into quiet corners. How hunger speaks in many dialects, some of stomach, some of spirit. She described the forbidden mango, the slap, the storeroom darkness, the dreams, the woman of starlight. She confessed she had feared she was a curse until the tree taught her she was balance. She wrote of the gate, of choosing earth over eternity, of watching the new grove sprout like hope and fast forward. She titled the manuscript "The Fruit That Chose Me." When the last page bore a final vine ink period, she pressed both palms to the bark cover, whispering a blessing to anyone who would read it. She felt the words soak into the fibers like rain into soil. Someday, she thought, children far away would hold this story and remember that healing begins when someone shares their portion without counting cost. She emerged from the grove as children arrived for lessons, their laughter bouncing off glowing trunks. She slid the manuscript into a satchel woven by the storytelling elders. There it would wait until a trustworthy traveler carried it to a library whose roof leaked more poems than rain. Late afternoon draped the sky in amber when the incident happened that sealed her legend in fresh ink. A small boy, skinny, dusty, shirt hanging in tatters, crept along the grove's perimeter. He was no student. Nzub guessed he had journeyed with a nomadic aunt who sold herbs in the next valley. His eyes darted like a lizard's, fixed on a plump, oval fruit glowing near the edge. Hunger had carved his cheeks into shadows. Nzub was sharing afternoon tea with 2 visiting skeptics, both doctors of philosophy, both expecting her to slip eventually and reveal a trick. She excused herself mid-sentence and walked toward the boy. He had just seized the fallen fruit, its glow washing his thin arms in pale gold. He glanced up, startled, assuming punishment. His fingers tightened as if ready to bolt. Nzub knelt until her gaze met his. "You're hungry," she said simply. His lower lip trembled. "I didn't mean, they said the fruit was magic." He seemed more frightened of her kindness than her reproach. She offered a gentle smile that curled like tender vines. "It's not stealing if you're hungry, child. Just promise to plant the seed." The boy frowned, confused, then managed a nod. Slowly he lifted the fruit to his mouth and took a single cautious bite. Light flared softly where his teeth broke skin, then settled into his eyes, brightening them by a shade. He gasped, the gasp of someone tasting hope disguised as juice. He devoured the rest in 3 eager bites, then looked at the seed in his palm, shaped like a tiny silver teardrop. Nzub guided his hand to a patch of soil just outside the grove's glow. Together they pressed the seed into the earth. The boy asked what would happen now. She told him seeds like this remembered kindness and grew only where generosity was promised. As they stood, the fallen fruit's glow lingered on the boy's skin. Simultaneously, the stars above twinkled brighter as if winking in approval. The visitors, watching from a distance, forgot their prepared arguments. One found himself touching tears at the corner of his skeptical eye. Zub looked up at the night sky, now alive with shimmering constellations. She remembered the river of fireflies, the children of stardust, her mother's glowing embrace. She felt the grove hum as roots acknowledged the boy's seed and the promise it carried. "Welcome home," she whispered, to the boy, to the seed, to the listening heavens. And somewhere between soil and sky, balance rippled outward again, fresh and certain as dawn.